So this morning, we're going to continue in our Sojourn series with really a difficult principle. Worship your shepherd by suffering for what is right. So God's flock is built on Christ for worship. This idea of a spiritual house, of being built up into essentially a temple, is a really key Old Testament concept. When God comes and says, I'm going to be with you, he calls a people out of Egypt and he says, I'm going to be with you, and so build a tent. The fancy word for that tent is a tabernacle. And it is a big deal because I live with you. This is really what we celebrate around Christmas time. Emmanuel is what? God with us. Jesus comes down and is living among us. God's flock is built on Christ for worship. So none of us, nobody here, Pastor Matt, Pastor Todd, we are not the foundation for the church. We do not bear the weight of all that God is building. It's Jesus. We are living stones built together to offer sacrifices. We are both the temple and the priests. The foundation is also the builder. This is something that's been helpful for me to think through as I'm teaching my children. We don't go to church on a Sunday morning. I will never say that to my kids. If I do, it's an accident. I will say, we're going to meet with the church today. And my generation is really, really quick to say, okay, I will proclaim God's excellencies through how I live. And that's true. And there's validity in that. But there's also a component where proclamation means proclamation. You got to say it. And how do we identify priests in our day? If you saw a priest walking down the street, how would you know? When he says in verse 9, you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, he's not talking to people in church leadership. Hey, you are a priesthood. You are living stones being built together to offer spiritual sacrifices. What do priests do? They offer sacrifices. And so, hey, you're a priest this morning. Or how would you recognize a priest in this spiritual sense? Well, by the way he acts and by what he says. How would people recognize you as a priest? We're foreigners. This isn't where we were made to be. And so since you're walking through this valley of the shadow of death, not where you were meant to be, then abstain from the passions of the flesh, which wage war against yourself. Following the shepherd is an act of war against yourself. And those people who already worship themselves, they live like I am God, those people will take it personally when you choose not to do the same. They're going to call you evildoers because you don't worship yourself the way that they do. When people are talking to you like this, is your concern for their understanding of who God is? Because that's where he takes this. He's saying, use your freedom. Use that freedom to submit to governing authorities. All tied up in who God is. God has supreme authority. The supreme authority has already set you free. And yet he has in place these lesser authorities. So we can submit to them knowing that we're already set free by the supreme authority. So what if it's an oppressive authority? Peter says, hey, look at Jesus. How much more oppressive does it get than going through a wrongful trial and given the death penalty and it being carried out? Here's where it's so difficult for us to reconcile this. This is our Savior. We want to be like him in every way, but we also have to acknowledge the fact that part of following Jesus is suffering when we've done the right thing. We worship our shepherd by suffering for what is right, and what is right sometimes is when we've been wrong.